We acknowledge the Yagara and Ghana nations as traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and learn, and their continuing connection with the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to them and their elders past and present.
All content related to this program is for general informational purposes only and contains stories and discussions around mental health that may be disturbing to some listeners. If you are concerned about yourself or someone you know, please seek professional individual advice and support. More details are contained in our show notes.
Hey Louise, did you get that special package I sent you?
I got a headset, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a new virtual reality mind meld meditation that helps us to sit with our thoughts and feelings, where the teacher can actually be inside your head with you and hear what's going on. Want to give it a try?
It sounds very futuristic. Okay, headset's on. I'm ready.
Hello, and welcome to this mind meld meditation. Steel your mind and get ready to sit with those thoughts. Really sit with those thoughts that cause you distress. There won't be any respite here. You know you've got work to do, and this is the space where you'll think about everything you should be doing, should be paying attention to. And as we prepare now, taking a deep breath in, taking in all the bad energy so you can truly sit with it. Make a space in your mind where things can't wander too far. A nice, tight cave. Low ceiling, lit just how you like it, from above, with stark white light. Breathe out now, and fill that space with all the niggling thoughts you just breathed in.
You know you'll never be good enough to achieve that.
Is that a parent you see? Maybe a sibling or your best friend from school just having a joke. Sit with it. Don't let it go too quickly. That will be just another example to prove you can't follow through on anything.
You never call me.
Too late. You should have held on to that thought, but failed. Now who's this?
Would it hurt to pick up the phone once in a while?
That's right. Really sit with this one.
After everything we've done for you, that's the thanks we get?
Good one.
You're so bloody selfish.
Here it comes.
Man, that aircon is loud today.
Come back. Stay with it.
You never think of anyone else because it's all about you. Have you thought about losing weight?
Hang on a minute. You're meant to sit with these thoughts and really feel them.
I know you keep telling me you've got arthritic pain, but the tests don't support that.
Okay, let's sit with this one.
How did you go with the dietitian? Stop the bloody waterworks and just get on with something. Anything.
You really need to sit with these thoughts longer.
Yeah. Listen to the mind meld coach. You can't even focus on a single thought for more than 5 seconds. Your goldfish is more focused than you are. Speaking of goldfish.
Keep breathing. Stay focused on all of that bad energy. You'll never process it unless you let it all loose in that stark, tight cave in your mind.
As if I can already feel another bloody thought taking over. How much longer does this shit go on?
Now you're getting there.
I hope Andy didn't pay too much for this.
You do realize I can hear you.
You just need to stop wasting your time with exploring your feelings and get off your lazy ass.
That's better. Hold on to that.
You've got a million better things to do right now, and you've already heard all this before.
Keep an open mind.
I hope Andy can't hear this, but this coach is full of shit. My mind is open. Do a better job. I can hear you fucking breathing. It's creepy. And talk faster.
Ever heard of boundaries? I'm the one coaching you. I'll call the shots.
Look, as much as you keep saying I'm going to have a breakthrough, I've heard it all before. Just keep trolling through the same old shit.
Stay with it. What's that?
It's just a little song that runs through my head. Don't worry about it.
It's bloody crowded enough in here already. Knock it off. Focus.
Like I haven't heard that before. You're just wasting your time.
Come on.
Breathe in, breathe out. Do, do, do. Ha. All you're doing is justifying your laziness with another bullshit approach.
You only get out what you put in, and it's pretty clear you're not putting in any effort here.
I don't know why I'm doing this. Meditation's never worked for me.
Well, fuck you too. You're on your own.
Andy, you might need to return the mind meld hat. It doesn't work very well. Broken.
That to the drawing board.
Although it is very good at uncovering some pretty big emotions.
Absolutely. And this is Reframe of Mind,
where we deep dive into discussions about mental health, joined by some of Australia's leading minds to expand our understanding of the world and ourselves.
because we don't exist in a vacuum, and the way we talk about mental health shouldn't either.
We're your hosts, Louise and Andy Leroy.
So you've realised that toxic positivity just isn't going to cut it anymore.
Well, we did kind of take the hatchet to it in the last episode.
I think it's been a pretty big hatchet job the whole series through, actually.
Sounds like when you wrote that sketch at the top here, you took a hatchet to my inner monologue.
Oh, I think there's a bit of both of our monologues going in there, to be honest, but sure.
Look, it was always going to happen. I think the most consistent advice that we've received throughout this series is that you're better off sitting with your feelings and working through them instead of covering them up with toxic positivity.
Yeah, that though is still easier said than done, because without the right supports in place, it's not long before you start ruminating or worse still start to feel kind of explosive.
Hey, it was your mind meld that got angry, not me. So let's talk about big emotions this episode then, Andy, and exactly how we do deal with them.
Yeah, so this episode we're speaking to Director for Positive Minds Australia, Madhavi Nawana Parker. She is a behavioural consultant who works in schools and allied healthcare settings and specialises in building cultures of well-being, resilience, social emotional intelligence and confidence. So I think, she's the kind of person that you want to have around if you're in the middle of a tantrum.
When you had a tantrum as a 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old, whenever it was, Louise, you were meant to. I mean, that's we're meant to have emotional reactions. And as a species, we kind of suck at, listening to our gut. By the time we reach a certain age, we've been so controlled and so manicured around our feelings and just, be a good girl, be a good boy. We're around people now. Put on a brave face, be friendly, remember to say please and thank you, smile, and everything is designed. This comes from the parent ego.
As much as we all want a quick fix to life's problems, I think we know all too well by now that pretending something isn't there doesn't actually make it go away.
And cognitive neuropsychologist at the Brain and Mind Centre at the University of Sydney, Mirren Irish, gave us some insights into the brain's function around accessing painful memories.
My brain kind of redacts information if a memory associated around it has been really painful or traumatic. Grief in particular is a great one. And my example is always things like, dead cats or broken relationships. It's like sometimes I forget that those experiences existed because everything connected with that grief kind of goes back in to activate it. So is that, I don't think I have dementia, but that sounds similar to what people experience going through that. So what's kind of going on with us there? I assume other people have this experience and it's not, I'm not the anomaly.
Yeah. No, I think the scenario of grief and its relationship to memory is very complex. And I think we don't have enough, there's not enough study actually being directed towards that. What we do know is that obviously negative events are very much retrieved in more detail. But I think the caveat is that there can come a point where you've retrieved something so many times that you actually start to lose the detail and the specificity of the memory. And it becomes much more abstracted, almost like a fact or a very overgeneral sort of a schematic of the event. And also when you factor in then that very heavy burden of emotion that comes with, a bereavement and grief, there is almost a protective sort of function, I think, that comes into play that we don't fully understand yet, where it's almost as though you reach a certain tipping point of emotion and the brain will be able to recall the gist of the event, but will not be able to focus as squarely on the emotions. And it may just be a way of protecting against painful reliving of an event over and over again.
Have you ever had a spray at someone out of the blue?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, that's a big emotion.
Yeah. Grief, another big emotion.
Worry, anxiety, fear, frustration, excitement. They're all big
big
emotions.
emotions. Yeah.
And we develop our strategies around these emotions from an early age. Sometimes we do end up in a place as adults where we've literally outgrown our strategies, though, and we want to do something different.
Yeah, and Madhavi helped us to understand what this is all about, as well as some other ways we can approach it.
This is what I hear every day. And, I work with parents. I don't just work with the child. I work with parents. I work with their team at school. And they'll tell me, I wish I knew this. I wish my parents knew this. I wish my teachers knew this, because we have to unlearn as a generation. Really, that withholding of emotion is so common, right? Like, I think back, and it was, even around how children were, and there are so many strengths to every generation. So don't get me wrong. There are so many wonderful things that every generation did really, really well.
Yeah.
It was that we didn't know about emotional intelligence, and that this is what we need to get along in life. I mean, life, when we look at the number one indicator for happiness and resilience, it's relationships, it's connection with other people and the quality of that. And how do we have good relationships? It's by using our EQ. It's by tuning into our own feelings and knowing what to do with them, and knowing how to tune into other people's feelings and know what to do with those. So I hear it every day, what you're saying, Louise, which is, I wish I knew, and I wish I had that information. And now sometimes when people come to me and their children are teenagers, I see people who come to me wanting to rebuild relationships with their adult children. And we have this conversation about how there's so much to unlearn from how they grew up and what they knew. And it is a daily conscious practice to get really comfortable with using these new approaches to responding to a really frazzled kid. I mean, for me at work, and as a mother of 3 young children myself, you spend your day with underdeveloped brains, which means until you're 25, Louise, you just operate off a lot of impulse and emotion, right?
Yes.
So, we know that when we're around a young person or any person who's dysregulated, we absorb that. So, the contagion of emotion is a very well-known thing. So we then get dysregulated. We then get really worked up and upset. And we have to learn the skill, but as adults, which is so much harder, to be able to stay calm while someone else in front of us isn't so calm. So, yeah, I wish I knew that from childhood. It would have made everything easier, of course. But thank goodness we can teach it to this generation that's now very much, part of the Australian curriculum. And with the people with whom I work overseas, people are starting to see this is so important. If we don't teach this at school and focus just on numeracy and literacy, how are young people going to turn into people that can get along well and understand all of these things we need for the workplace and our relationships and marriages and partnerships?
So you do a lot of work with families and kids, and you talk about big emotions and how to actually, I suppose, respond thoughtfully when they start to occur. Is that something that's difficult to teach?
It is incredibly difficult to teach. And the great thing, Andy, is we have so much more information now about how to teach that. And we're teaching it to children while their brains are still very underdeveloped. When we look at a child, when we look at a baby, the baby is born and the brain is completely undeveloped. It's just waiting for information and experiences, and it wires from all of that. So now that we're able to understand the importance of social emotional literacy, and we know now that is something that is teachable and learnable. IQ tends to stay at a pretty steady point throughout our lifetime, but when we look at EQ, it can be developed, and it just takes a lot of practice. And the interesting, part of when I'm teaching it is I always remind, whether I'm working with adults and teaching them how to be calmer or whether I'm working with children, I remind them the best time to practice being calm is when you're calm. And what I mean by that is, the reality is, we teach children to take deep breaths. We teach adults, we teach ourselves, be calm, think through this, bring in another thought. But we're doing it in a state where we're really dysregulated. So when you're upset, you're going to think, well, I don't want to use that strategy. Why would I want to use that strategy? So instantly your state of mind will often reject what you know is good for managing your levels of emotion. So in order to really teach this well and for the learner to be able to take it on quicker is practicing it every day. So engaging in calm states every day, throughout the day, whenever you remember, whenever someone reminds you. And it's those micro moments that really start to change our brains and exercise that part of the brain and wire that part of the brain to be calmer. So yes, it's hard to teach, Andy, and it takes, I think, a real genuine interest and care in people's emotional well-being to stick with it, because you don't see change in some children and some adults who've had really difficult lives, or for many of the young people with whom I've worked, their neurodiversity, their learning differences mean that part of the brain needs a lot more exercise in order for it to really start to see some change.
You mentioned that the brain is still growing, I think I don't know if the word was plastic that you used, but I know we've heard that from neuroscientists before, up until 25. So what goes on in the brain between 0 and 25, and are we just can we grow still after 25, or is it just a lot harder?
Yeah, it's we absolutely can, but those first, look, we know those first 3 to 4 years, and with neuroplasticity, we can change our brains, and we can change right until our last breath, Louise. There is always a capacity to change. But as you mentioned, it is harder if you've gone through a lot of stuff in that first 25 years, right? So if we look at all the stages, and again, we could just talk about the brain for a long time.
Yes.
But to cut it short, we look at a baby, and this beautiful baby comes in with this blank slate, and they are looking to people first and foremost. And our first experiences really matter, right? And what we're exposed to, we develop associations, and it's why we get funny feelings. And sometimes they're good, funny feelings about people, and our gut's telling us, oh, give that one a wide berth. But sometimes they're just based on those early experiences where we might have encountered someone that wasn't kind enough, someone who perhaps might have even been cruel or had a short fuse. And we then can associate, right from babyhood, people that look that way feel really uncomfortable. To me, it's like people with post-traumatic stress, or people who've never been exposed to, disabilities or different coloured people. I mean, there's always those stories where really kind people come to vaccinate, and because, in a country, in a developing country, and the children have never seen a person other than a brown person. So this is a brown person talking about brown people, saying, if that's all you've seen, and they'd be terrified until they see, oh no, this person is helping me, and they hear that beautiful warm tone, and they develop a new experience and realize, okay, this is why we are always encouraging parents, make sure your children, meet a broad range of people and mix with children with disabilities, and watch the Special Olympics. I know I'm digressing. I will go back to the brain, but this is how influenced we are, right? If we just sit in our little bubbles, then everything will feel like a threat. So, but when we look at brain development in those early years, that first 8 years, we are just running off emotion, and that is the part of the brain. It's all about how everything feels, and we process primarily through that emotion. So if you're sitting in a classroom or sitting in a family where everything feels, mostly really good, right, and warm and fuzzy, then you will learn. You will access that prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, and you'll have a really good chance of thinking rationally. Now, if you're under 8, and then we'll get to 25, but if you're under 8 and you're often exposed to a really difficult emotional environment, then you're not even going to go to your prefrontal cortex and think rationally about how to be calm and what Madhavi taught me last week about managing my emotions. You're not going to go there because you're just going to be in this emotional state of fight, flight, freeze, and that's how the brain is when it's young, which is why nourishing and loving and kindness and responding to our children's emotions as much as we can, and if we're working with children, as much as we can with empathy and compassion and our own calm, our own regulated state. Children in those first few years need us to co-regulate them. They look to us as the calm, mature person to be calm enough to bring them back to calm. And that's what the brain is looking for in those first 8 years in particular, particularly, really those first 3 to 4 years. But then those first 8 years, you really can make a fantastic impression on a young person's brain by using your own emotional intelligence on them, by being an empathetic person, being a calm person as much as possible, and then apologising when you're not and making it better and repairing it because we're all human. But then it continues, Louise, up until you're 25, and that's more at that point, the prefrontal cortex steps in, but you're still really impulsive and quite emotional. So, there's a reason why insurance costs more for a motor vehicle, the younger you are, right? If you try to rent a car, they check, who's driving this. So for me, at 47, they're okay with it. So like, she's got a 47-year-old brain. She's been around for a very long time. The brain has had lots of practice doing this. It's fine. We're happy to, take the car, take whatever one you want. It's not a problem, So that's the challenge more so, is just everything is still wiring and you still mess up a lot in those first 25 years. Again, why we need our parents to forgive us and hear us out and say those beautiful words of, you're not the first person to make this mistake. And I'm here with you to sort through this and we'll figure it out. That is how we grow emotional intelligence, is words like that. That's what teenagers need to hear. That's what adults need to hear. They need to know we messed up when we were kids too. And that grows their emotional intelligence and develops the brain to its optimal mental health and well-being. But we can keep working on it, Louise. Absolutely.
We're definitely over 25 now, but good thing Madhavi tells us that there's still time for us. Our brain can still be learned.
Yeah.
Or our brain can still learn. Apparently I can't learn how to do sentences.
Do you get extra credits for being 50? Like, is that twice the power now?
you double the capacity.
Yeah. I'm firing on 2 cylinders now.
Isn't it a 4-cylinder engine?
Look, I think it might be an 8-cylinder, to be honest. So I've got a little ways to go, I think. But we're at episode 31, right? And, we've recapped throughout the series of where we've been up to in our journey. And, of course, this is our story as well as all the stories of the people that we've been talking to. So, where it started out on my personal journey with this podcast was not long after I'd lost my dad. I was in a pretty raw point of grief. I had some really big emotions.
Grief is a big emotion, huge emotion.
Yeah, it is. It's a massive emotion. And your favourite word of mine, flashpoint, happened.
You know, after I said that to you at around episode 5 that you are heavily reliant on flashpoint, you did ease up on flashpoint.
I did. I'm going to use it now, though.
Yeah, you can have one.
Thank you. I'll have one flashpoint.
Yeah.
But it's just recollecting the flashpoint. And this was around the time of the funeral, and I had quite a big out-of-character outburst with one of my brothers, and it caused some friction with us for quite a while. Obviously, he was going through the same grief as me, having lost his parent as well, duh. And sometimes it feels like that friction never really kind of went away.
Yeah.
I don't know where that comes from, though, because, in my formative years, it was kind of reinforced that emotions aren't okay. Boys don't cry, if I was having a tantrum or I was crying, I was called a baby, that kind of stuff. If you kind of learn that you're only going to get called a whinger if you're upset, then you kind of start bottling it up, don't you?
Oh,
and
yes.
Let me tell you,
the explosion.
On that day, the cork came out of the bottle.
The bottle done popped.
sprayed everywhere.
Is it like when you shake up a bottle of champagne and then you go to take the cork off and it explodes and hits the ceiling and leaves a big dent in it?
I think it's when you put a Mentos into a bottle of Coca-Cola and shake it and then take the cap off. It was kind of like that.
Yeah.
And I felt awful though, I didn't want to speak to my brother like that, but it was a lot of pent-up stuff that just, for some reason, it just came up all then and there, and there we had it. It was there and it couldn't go back in, so ta-da!
It reached a flashpoint.
Yeah, it did. It reached a huge flashpoint. I guess through the conversations that we've had with Madhavi, these things happen sometimes, and the embarrassment we feel as adults in having that kind of outburst, I don't know, it kind of feels to me like it's a result of not really teaching ourselves along the way or not learning along the way how to actually process those emotions and to actually have the conversations we need to have before it gets to that flashpoint.
No more. You've had enough flashpoints. That's it. You've used your quota of flashpoints.
Flashpoint quota achieved.
I did say last episode that one of the turning points for me in this journey of the last 18 months has been actually getting in touch with my negative emotions and allowing myself to feel them instead of suppressing them or dissociating from them and condemning anything that I felt that wasn't positive as bad, so that it wasn't enough to feel bad in the feeling bad. I then also had to feel bad about feeling bad. Another realization that kind of has come out of that is, especially in working with a therapist, where has that come from? Because I don't think that we are born that way. I think we pick up a lot of these things as we grow up through life, through experiences. And look, I'll often make that joke in therapy when my psychologist says, and where do you think that idea came from? We're like, oh, here comes a blame the parents again, because that's what you do, I suppose. But, a lot of that negative voice that I've heard for a long time, it probably was the influence of people in my life, like my father. And he never expressed much in terms of emotion. He was the suck-it-up princess guy.
Yeah.
Worse than that, though, is sometimes he was intentionally mean. It's hard to say these things without sounding like a horrible daughter, to be honest. He died a few years ago. So it's not like I can bring these things up with him, to him. It's not like he ever gets the chance to refute anything that I've said on a podcast about him. I can only speak from my own experiences and the way that I felt, because as I've said before, I feel like he wasn't given a great role model for him to get in touch with his emotions. And I do feel like he probably did the best that he could. And it was an improvement on what he had, but it wasn't enough for a sensitive soul like me.
And I think, like in a similar way to me, you're actually breaking a really long family cycle of behavior and attitudes.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And because he was so closed off emotionally, he was mean. Sometimes I felt like he actually derived pleasure out of getting a negative reaction from me that would give him joy. It's the skyhooks story, basically, which is, I remember when I was really quite young, maybe 5 or 6 or something like that, he was down in his shed. He had some mates over and I think he was stitching me up. There's like that old trades joke about, go get checkered paint from the shop and go get skyhooks or whatever else.
My mum used to tell a story about her dad sending her to the shed for some post holes.
Yeah. And so, he's having a laugh and he's like, oh, why don't you go get the skyhooks or something, help us out with the skyhooks. I'm like, yeah, well, I can go do that. I can show you where it is. And he's having a laugh. And, I don't know, maybe to an apprentice tradie, it's funny, but to a sensitive 6-year-old girl, it's not.
Yeah.
And so I run up to the kitchen. I get I think it might have been like the TV Guide magazine where it had the CD Club.
Yeah.
And you could order that, or it might have been Cassette Club or Record Club or something like that.
I always used to have my fantasy picks with those and have my big list of CDs I wanted to get done with it.
I used to tick off like how many on this list could I have. And then on the toy catalogue page, did you play this game where you like flip the page and you're like, okay, now if I could only have one thing on this page, what would it be?
No, I didn't do that.
I did that with every page of the toy catalogue.
Anyhow.
So I get the magazine, I run back down, I'm like, here's the Skyhooks. And he's like, is that really? Blah, 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 saying I'm an idiot. But I'm like, no, look, it's Skyhooks. And it was Skyhooks, the band. I'm like, here's where you can get the Skyhooks.
And they've got women in uniform.
It's a horror movie. Anyway, those kind of things, taunting. And then obviously I got in trouble for that because that's not what he meant. So in that kind of situation, he was taking pleasure out of taunting me and then wanting to prove me wrong and make me feel like an idiot was going to bring him joy. And it's a very mild example of that because a lot of those things kind of happened all the time. So sometimes I felt like he would just disagree with me for the sake of disagreeing because it would be better to get that reaction. Mm-hmm. Something that I can reflect on and say, well, clearly learned that is to hide my emotions. Because if I hide my emotions and I don't engage in those conversations, then they can't be used against me. You know, if I don't show joy, it can't be taken away. If I don't show sadness, it can't be used to taunt me with. And as I got older, I completely realized, I think I was 17 when I left the house and I moved away to uni. And it wasn't until after that that I was able to achieve some kind of, I suppose, peace in being able to communicate with him, because when I was there with him every day, if I engaged was a battleground. And when I came back to visit for shorter amounts of time, I was kind of able to steel myself against that and bite my tongue and hold it in for as long as I could, because you can't argue with a narcissist. You can't reason with them, because even if you have all the data and all of the facts to back you up, you're going to be wrong.
You're still going to be wrong. Yeah,
you're always going to be wrong. So I was able to stop trying. And for the rest of our relationship, I will say, for the rest of his life, I stopped trying to argue. I just let him say whatever he had to say because it was easier for me.
We get into those positions, where we just kind of start to not bother. We just kind of know where it's going to head, so we just take the shortcut and don't actually go there.
Where that leads to, though, is the hindsight of me saying this is, you know, I realized I stopped actually sharing any kinds of emotions or even stories with my parents. Like if I told them that I was struggling with anything, I feel like it would be used again as a weapon or brought back up.
I can relate to that.
I feel like I probably shut them out of a lot of my life. You know, I started telling them an edited version of my life and of how I felt.
Yeah, it's like we, from a very early age, start installing all of these little things and they build up and they build up. And as much as we'd love a quick fix for it, as nice as that would be to make it all go away, you know, probably a better step we could take is in the direction of strengthening our emotional intelligence. It's also known as EQ, and Madhavi helped us to explore it.
It seems that the world is getting, faster and faster every day. I was reading some stats recently which said that compared to about 30 years ago, we're speaking at, I think about 20 or 30 words faster per minute for native English speakers. And the more people I talk to, the more people say their attention span is getting shorter and shorter. So what are the challenges that you're facing with someone who might be just looking for a quick fix for something like this?
Well, that is the challenge, isn't it? And I think as a species, we can take in so much information, but we are under so much pressure because of this information overload that you've just mentioned. So I think the challenge always for me, and that hasn't changed, even back 20 years ago when I began this work, we all want a quick fix, I think, Andy. If you're struggling, if you're having a difficult time, people come to people like me to fix it. And the sooner I can fix it, the better. And yet we're talking about emotional intelligence and social confidence and resilience and well-being. And these are all attached to, they're a lifelong process. They're on a continuum. They're not a fixed thing, and resilience can change from one day to the next. Our social confidence can change from one day to the next depending on what's happening or where we are in our lives. And so it is an ongoing challenge. And I don't know that people are wanting. It's really interesting. It's such a good point, because definitely the quick fix has been a challenge, I think, for people in my area of work, because naturally we feel desperate when our children struggle. when we're struggling, we want to get that yucky feeling out of me and out of my kid, and we all want to feel good again. But yes, I think perhaps the patience for the ability to really stick with it. If you look at multitasking, for example, we just go from one thing to another, and I do it myself, and I try really, really hard to give myself, a conscious message to give everything focused attention. But moments later, we're just moving at a pace that's so quick. And so we can't almost do anything properly if we're doing too much. So, yeah, this quick fix is a challenge, and that shorter attention span I see in schools every day, even with children being used to communicating via text. You don't have to sit there and wait for someone to think anymore. You can just walk away, go and do something else and come back and hope they've replied. You know what I mean? So It's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting.
I imagine to some extent you really need to work on some of the foundational things before you start to get to the sweet spot or the good parts, as some people might describe it. I'm thinking specifically about maybe people aren't on the same page as to what they want out of a relationship or their interactions. I can think of an example where I've been dealing with a family member and we're very much on different pages, but for me at the moment, it's more about me trying to look at myself and see what I want out of this and what's going to work for me. So if I'm doing that, but that other party isn't, then I can imagine this sort of thing still has its challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's extraordinary that you're able to have that level of self-awareness, because most of us, when there's any difference in opinion, the usual practice is we go into our own heads and our own perspective. And as I explain to anyone in conflict or in a difference of opinion, or, even just a small one, everyone thinks they're right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
That's how we've got a thought in our head is like, well, I have this thought and this feels very right for me, so it must be right. So I think that's where compassion training is also very useful, because, we can't make, so yes, everything starts with that self-awareness. We have to look within. We have to go, well, what is my part? I mean, there's always two parts to everything. And so absolutely, we begin with self-awareness. That's where any good change happens. And then from self-awareness, the next important thing is compassion and understanding and empathy for the other person, which is another crucial emotional intelligence skill, isn't it? Is that ability to go, well, this really means something to this other person. Their perspective is their perspective and it's meaningful to them. So that always helps me, and it certainly helps a lot of people that I'm working with to cope with the emotions that will also come when you look at yourself, you see where you need to adjust and change, but then the other person might stay in this fixed state, because we're all at a different point, aren't we, with our own self-awareness and our willingness to resolve things. For some people, there's a meaning in that conflict or in that challenge. So they need to hold on to it, and they're not at a point they're ready to let go of that challenge. So I think compassion has probably, for 20 years for me, with children, adults, executives, whoever I'm working with, that focus on compassion and empathy and the ability to just try and see it from that other person's perspective and then accept their perspective even if you don't agree. And it's not about agreeing to disagree, because I think it's always good to continue to work and strive to reach a mutual understanding. But sometimes that can be a really helpful way to soften the emotion within us too, because sometimes we don't get the outcome that we're looking for either. No matter how hard we try.
Yeah, look, grief is a process.
Yeah. Is it ever?
Everyone does it differently. And if you're part of the grieving family or a wider circle, it's going to be possible that you'll come into conflict with someone else who's processing their grief differently.
And different situations, different people affect differently. I've said before that the grief I felt over my father dying from cancer was nowhere near the grief I felt over my dead cats. And that's how grief is different, isn't it, It's
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It strikes everybody differently. You were actually, you've got the honour for having been there at the loss of both of my parents because my mum passed away after I moved to Darwin where we first met.
the honour. I love how
The
you say
honour.
that. The
There you
honour.
go. Little side story. Caught up with an old school friend recently. Said to her, oh, look, I haven't spoken to such and such on a birthday recently because awkward, like Dad actually died on her birthday. And she said, oh my God, that's so weird because your mum died on my birthday. I was like, what? And it's true. Like I'd forgotten. But yeah, so I've got two friends who have like the date of death of my parents.
I thought your side note was going to be something like that. Remember when I said to you a couple of months ago, I said, oh, there's that guy I know who runs that thing. I'm just saying thing to not give anything away. There's a guy I know who runs that thing. Hey, maybe he'd be a great person to reach out to. And I jumped on his Facebook and he died 5 years before.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I should have reached out before then.
Might have been a bit more effective. We can laugh now. We can joke about death, and it sounds really weird and morbid to be thinking that. But
I only think it sounds weird, and it might only sound weird and morbid to people who haven't been in that situation. Because
yeah,
I think a lot of times with grief, though, and particularly death, it's kind of sometimes funny and inappropriately funny.
I didn't have that experience myself. Like when I was grieving, I felt really, I didn't feel good. Let's just put it that way. I completely went into myself, and I found it really hard both times to make sense of the world at all.
Yeah.
This time around, when I lost Dad, I had the support of some really great friends to help me get through it. And, sometimes the family you make outside of your family of origin are the ones that really understand you, Like, I know that siblings and cousins and whoever, they're related by blood, and there seems to be this common belief that blood's thicker than water and they're the ones who really understand you and will be there for you. But, you've really got to kind of understand that sometimes we don't have the capacity to be there for each other, even if it's blood family.
Yeah.
And I call them my three sisters. They were there for me the whole time, and their help and support was invaluable. And even when I came back to Adelaide from Sydney, because that whole period was just so fucking weird, like it was when COVID had just struck. So my partner couldn't come to the funeral. It was interstate. So I was up there by myself, but with my family of origin, obviously, but withdrawing into myself and not being able to make sense of the world, suddenly I felt very isolated because they've started their own families. And now that my dad was gone, it kind of felt like that I'd been kind of flipped off that roundabout to some extent. Probably a silly thought, but I think, those dynamics do change. And they have changed, and things are different. And it was a really good friend of mine who has also since passed. When Mum died, actually reached out to me, gave me a call, and she had such a lovely way about her. And she said, how you doing? And I told her what was going on, and she understood, obviously, because she knew what had happened. But she said to me at the time, she gave me an analogy. I'm the analogy queen, so I love a good analogy. And she said to me that grief is like a series of waves. When something happens, like a death of somebody close or some other trauma that causes grief to activate, it's like a initial dump of a wave.
Yeah.
One of those massive dumpers at the beach. And you just keep getting swept away by these waves of emotion. But over time, you learn how to negotiate them. Over time, they become less intense as well. They never stop. And there's no cutoff point for when you start to manage life better again. Like there is no, okay, I'm at month 3 now, I am in this phase. It's not like that at all. But over time, those waves do become lesser and lesser, and it becomes an ongoing adjustment process of negotiating life without that person from that point on. To this day, whenever Mother's Day comes around, I can either be quite okay or I can be a fucking mess.
Yeah.
Because I still really miss my mum.
Yeah.
And really caught me by surprise that first year after losing her, because I walked up the street, up Smith Street in Darwin, and without even realising what time of year it was, I started to see all of these banners on light posts saying Mother's Day, get this for Mum, and all of the advertising that goes on, and that sent me right back through that dark door. So we talk a lot about triggers and traumas and that sort of thing over this series. And grief is a really good example of that in a micro-focused way, because when you are in that state of grief and you're starting to manage things, then there's something else that'll come from the side to do it. And you'll often hear people say, oh, the first year's the worst. You find once you get through toxic positivity, you'll be fine once you get past that first year. Well,
no.
Yes, but
sometimes,
no.
maybe.
Yeah, because, it was 2009 when my mum died, and sometimes it doesn't take much more than seeing a photograph of her pop up in the feed of my Facebook to bring a tear to my eye.
I mean, I'm the same with my cats, and I know that it probably sounds flippant comparing the two, but it's...
No, it's not though. It's like you loved your cats though,
I said I went to a party on the weekend, and woman I was talking to, her dog died a couple of months ago. And what a happy birthday party we were at, where we were like... she's telling me that, and I was telling her about my old man cat, Bailey, who died. He died now about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And I said, there is no subject in the world that will bring me to my knees, to sadness, to grief faster than thinking of all my dead cats.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter how much time passes.
No, it doesn't.
And I can sit here and talk with you about my dead father and not have this same reaction.
Yeah. And
that's grief.
It is. And grief acts in different ways with different things. Grief can be not just about losing a person. It can be about, for somebody, losing a limb, or it can be for somebody losing a career. Grief can strike us in lots of different ways.
Did I ever tell you about there was one relationship I had, and it didn't even go for very long. I think I dated them for about 8 months or so. And afterwards, I had so much grief over the loss of that relationship that 2 years after, I was still feeling that grief. And, it probably was 18 months or so before I even considered going out on a date with somebody else. And I met this person on, I think it was Tinder or something like that. And I went out on a date with them, and then they're like, "Can I kiss you?"
I'm guessing this person was English as a second language.
Yeah. Can I kiss you? And you know what? Thumbs up, because you got consent, mate. Thumbs up. But I said, yeah, okay. And then literally I start to kiss him, and I just fucking burst into tears. And yeah. And so there I am crying in this dude's fucking mouth. And I'm like, I obviously never saw him again. He did message a few more times after that, but I was embarrassed, and I wasn't really interested. But grief. So a relationship that didn't go very long caused that reaction. Recently broke up with someone I was with for 5 years. Didn't fucking cry. Right? So grief.
So chronic illness mindset coach Tisha Rose, we've spoken to her a few times throughout this series, and she knows a lot about grief. She was diagnosed with MS at the age of 22. She has more recently been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer and is currently managing that. She managed to capture a snapshot, though, when she was initially diagnosed with MS, of what helped her move through grief. Is there a tendency to get stuck sometimes in a period of grief, or around that grief response when entering a period of darkness with a chronic illness or something of that nature?
Yeah, totally. I think you actually sometimes can't see past what's in front of you, and it can be really difficult. And that's okay sometimes as well. Like I talk about, if you are in a place where, like, for example, lying in a hospital bed, unable to move, sometimes you can't see past that, and that's okay. And you need to do all types of things to protect your emotional well-being during those times by, for example, staying in the moment, not letting your mind wander too far ahead, because you go into such dark places and you just don't know how to get out of there. And I also think that sometimes people almost feel not comfort in that grief, but it is just really hard to pull yourself out of it. And sometimes you don't want to. You just want to sit with those emotions. And I think that's okay sometimes until you're in the place where you can move forward, and whether that's when you're starting to feel a little bit better, whether it's when you become more actively involved in getting better. When I was in hospital, I really struggled when I was just lying passively on a hospital bed, being pumped with drugs, unable to move. But as soon as I started getting involved in my recovery, then I felt like I was moving forward in some of that grief because I could see a way through it.
So we generally think of grief in negative terms. I mean, understandably, because it doesn't feel very good. And
No.
it's not my favourite emotion of all the emotions.
We'll probably choose something else if I possibly could, thanks.
Yeah. Also, quite life-changing. Normally, grief is accompanied by something that, rips it all up and...
Some kind of life-changing event of some sort.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, when we spoke to CEO and founder of La Joie Skin, Daphne Kapitas, she said that it's exactly because of the life-changing effects of grief that she respects it.
And the thing is, with grief, I've got to say, because I've had a few people say to me, actually a few people, I've had my kids say to me, like, don't you ever get over this, Mum? Like, these are young kids, like when they were 8. And I said to them, you don't get over grief. It's part of you. Yeah. I am who I am because of the grief.
Oh, it's so true, isn't it, Andy? Those moments of trauma, those moments of grief, they really shape who we are.
Yeah, they do. And, for me, it's been quite the journey of actually changing my behaviours and getting a lot more self-awareness about myself. And, I think typically sometimes when you're in a confrontational kind of setting, people will say to you something to the effect of, have a good look at yourself.
Yeah.
And
take a good look at yourself.
And what that generally means is you're fucked and you need to just change what you do so that you cannot make me feel this way.
Yeah, you change everything about you so that I can feel better.
And I have had a good look at myself, and I've picked up on things through self-awareness of, things that I say and do that maybe I could change, but also things that I say and do that also put me in the line of fire and also disempower me. So it cuts both ways, buddy. You've got to be able to have that self-awareness about you to kind of say, okay, well, I don't like this situation that I'm in, but how have I contributed to it? That's not to say go around blaming victims, because that's certainly not the case.
No.
But out of all of those things, the common thread, remember I was speaking earlier about that friend that told me about the waves and the dumping waves and the waves of grief. Well, she had this great saying as well with things in her life, and she would say the only thing that was common to all of those events that I didn't like was that I was there.
Yes.
How does that then reflect on how I actually interacted in those moments to create whatever I created for myself in that?
I think it's similar to that idea where, if you have the same people keep saying the same things about you, eventually you've got to go, maybe it's not them. Maybe it's me.
Maybe it is me.
Maybe it is me. The grief has acted as a catalyst for change, where there was that moment, that moment where you acted out of grief that caused the spiral, the dominoes, I suppose. And further down the dominoes is not just the disconnection from those relationships, but also looking at whether there's any chance to repair them.
Yeah, well, look, when that relative ripped into me and told me that, my parents were ashamed of me and all that kind of bullshit, essentially. The older version of me would have actually just not actually said anything, or would have actually brushed it off, not actually stood up for myself.
Would have sucked it down, princess.
Yeah, not believing it, but also,
not
there's hurt
the
that
boat.
Comes with, there's hurt that comes with not responding to it and actually saying, well, I know for a fact that's not true. Now I know that I'm not prepared to take that kind of stuff. And also having that distance allowed me to really evaluate that relationship overall and consider whether I actually want to have that person return to my life, because as much as they've told me to go and have a good look at myself, I wonder if they've done the same for themselves. And I think a proper conversation around any of that really needs for both parties to have actually had some time for self-awareness and self-evaluation. But, if I'm going to continue to get told that I'm selfish or that it's all about me and I don't care about anybody else, well, clearly that's untrue, and I'm not prepared to enter into that kind of discussion or relationship.
There's a lot of people I've noticed in my experience that will say words like "you're being selfish," but what they fail to acknowledge is that by needing you to behave in a certain way for them, that they're actually the one being selfish, asking you to do that.
Yeah.
I think
that's
selfish
right.
is a word and a feeling that's used without any self-awareness.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Whenever that word is thrown about, it's usually thrown about by someone who has, I suppose, lost or perceive they've lost something from the actions or the words of the person they're calling selfish. I don't really kind of hold much weight in that word anymore, certainly when it's leveled against me, because I know myself and I know that I act better than that.
So breaking away from a family dynamic, which is essentially what you've done in the last 18 months or so, that really goes against that grain of that nuclear family, that stereotype that we get sold, blood is thicker than water. You stick with your family no matter what. So when we spoke to Madhavi, she actually had some really comforting reflections around those outdated stereotypes of society.
I can kind of sense that phrases like boys don't cry and stop being such an attention seeker and those sorts of things are really starting to lose their grip in society, hopefully. So we're starting to get a lot more conscious of the effects of those sorts of things on kids and other people in general. So I like that you're talking about normalising feelings as well, that it's okay to have feelings, whatever they are. But how do we get better at educating others on what we need?
We are definitely getting beyond the boys don't cry and all of that. So we're seeing so much more about the importance of acknowledging our children's emotions. And I think they'll be much better as a generation at expressing their emotions because we're teaching this in schools. For us, we just need to do that work on ourselves. We need to say, look, we're here once as far as we know, right? And it takes so much courage to say what we want and need when we're not sure that other person is going to understand. And particularly in those less healthy relationships, where we don't know what the reaction's going to be from that other person when we express our wants and needs. So that is also the other challenge I think we have as a generation is perhaps it's harder because we're all still learning to become more emotionally evolved and capable of expressing our needs and hearing other people's needs without taking insult to it. Because, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you said, I just need a hug, but your parents didn't know how to handle emotions, they might have got mad at you and go, well, I'm not going to hug you because you just did the wrong thing. You shouldn't have done that, you naughty whatever, So it's a real process, Andy, to be able to ask. But I think if we start with the easiest people, the people that understand us best and say, and look, we know the formula. The formula goes something along the lines of, start with how you're feeling rather than the problem with the behaviour. So I feel really upset when, XYZ happens, and I'm really hoping we can talk through this. I think we're all not so rehearsed, in that level of emotional intelligence. Often people go straight into attack mode. Rather than expressing what they actually need, they just say what they're mad about. Does that make sense? Did I explain that?
Backing up with the D's instead of the words, almost.
Yeah, that's it. So I think when we're more human about it and we can just say, I'm feeling really upset and I don't know if this is in my head and I really want to talk through this because I really care about our relationship. I really care about our work together. It doesn't matter what the relationship is that we're expressing it within. But if we go in with compassion, I think if we express our needs, not just from our own head, but from the head of the listener, and we think, well, how would I want to hear this complaint? How would I want to hear this person express their needs? I think we just soften instantly. I know I do, is if I see it and it's in my work in leadership or if it's in my work in a team or as a speaker or as a mother or as a wife, in all those things, I try really hard to express my emotions and my needs in a way that isn't going to feel like an insult to the other person. And if I get it wrong, I will always own it and do my best to make it better, and I think that's all we can do is our best, right? And keep trying to find our way expressing it. It's such a personal thing how we do this, but there is a way for all of us to do it.
I'm going to do a little circuit breaker here and say thanks for listening to us. If you love the show, let us know. Hit the subscribe button on your podcast app and show us those 5-star ratings. Remember to tell your friends about us and check our Patreon page for access to even more content, like extended interviews at patreon.com/reframe of mind. The more people we get talking about mental health, the more supported we'll all be.
So we've been talking about my grief journey after my dad went, but you had a bit of an altercation yourself after your dad died, didn't you?
I'm glad you said dad and not cats, because I don't know which cat I would have fought. I fought with one of my cats over my other cat. You never loved me. You were ashamed of me.
I didn't want to be for the food.
Actually, well, I mean, almost though. After Bailey died not that long ago, I mean, all the other cats realised that the saucy morsels have now dried up. So it's there have been some confrontations around saucy morsel time. What do you mean that we're no longer getting $1.30 tins of Dine and we've just got to eat whatever that is?
Oh, the harsh reality.
The harsh reality that the saucy morsels were only for the 20-year-old man and everybody else just got the lickings. Different situation of grief though. Yeah. When my father died, see, I think grief, it really does bring, especially in that acuteness of when someone is in that position, when they're dying, when there's like, you know, with him, we were waiting at the hospital for close to a week. We knew it was coming. That's when I went around to my parents' house and we had the inverted commas last words conversation, which didn't end up being his last words to me, but they were, you know, the meaning of that conversation is here's my last chance to tell you these things. A few days later, he deteriorated rapidly and ended up in the palliative care ward at the hospital. I know we've talked about the association with Dolly Parton and my cat Eve dying. Well, my father went to the hospital on Bruce Springsteen night. So forever tied to Bruce Springsteen will now be the memory of him being admitted to the hospital for palliative care, me finding out halfway through the concert, waiting till the end, going to the hospital to try and see him that night and not being allowed in by the emergency staff and then having to come back the next morning. Fuck you, Logan Hospital. Also, seeing I'm naming and shaming, and they do deserve to be named and shamed for this, someone tried to take him to the morgue before he was fucking dead.
I remember you telling me that, yes.
He wasn't dead yet, Logan Hospital, and someone tried to take him to the fucking morgue. They came up with the trolley and then they said, I'm here for Mr. Poole. Well, Mr. Poole's not ready for you yet.
Yeah, sorry, the Grim Reaper's first.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, that's
anyway,
traumatic.
Fuck you, Logan Hospital. I'm very happy to say that. I fucking hate Logan Hospital. Well, anyway, I'm not editing that out either because fuck you, Logan Hospital. So. Yeah, so he was in there for a few days beforehand. You know, he died on the Friday night. He was admitted on Bruce Springsteen Tuesday, and it was probably Wednesday afternoon that he actually was really conscious for the last time. Mm-hmm. So he saw some friends, I think, on Tuesday night, on Wednesday night, and I think they might have been the last people to actually speak to him in person. The rest of the time was in his morphine state. It was, I mean, besides the fact that he tried to hit on me when he thought I was a nurse.
Hello.
The other thing that was really interesting, and I know it's an aside from the grief of it, but in that state, they give you this little box, a button where you push for your own morphine. I don't know if have you seen these things, and it's like a rectangle, maybe the size of an iPad, slightly longer. It's funny because when he was in that state, he was kind of muttering things around because he loved his tools, you know, he loved making things. His place that he spent time was in the shed when he was creating stuff. And so in those morphine-induced states, he was treating his little morphine box like it was a hammer or a saw. And he was reaching for things and asking for things like, can you hand me this? Can you pass me that? Yeah, I'm just going to go down to the shed and
get some skyhooks.
I suppose one of those end-of-life experiences, it's comforting to think that the place that he ended up before the end was in his mind, in the place that brought him the most joy, that's actually where he went to.
It's like when you hear stories of people who see people from their past when they're about to cross over. You know, Dad was talking to Mum at one point. He could see Mum on the bed opposite him. You know, he would say that he could see his own mother, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I guess that's a whole other episode, isn't it, really, about
it's a whole other series, I think.
end-of-life experiences and things like that.
The point that I was making with that is that happened around Wednesday. So by the time he died on, it was actually Saturday morning, it was like 1 a.m., but Friday night, Saturday morning, there'd been 3 days with no contact. There were 3 days with us all at the hospital in the same room. Heightened tensions. There's his mother around, and this is how little she's ever had to do with my life. When I saw her, I forgot her name, and I had to ask my mum what her name was. My grandmother.
Grandma?
It wasn't grandma. But I'm going to tell this story because I think it really speaks to something else that we've spoken about in this episode, which is patterns. Because while I say there are a lot of things that happened with my father and the way that I felt like he couldn't express emotion and couldn't talk to me, and that he treated me when I was growing up that are damaging, it's things like this story which make me have empathy for him because of him being a part of that generational cycle as well. So my grandmother, when he was in the last couple of days, completely out of it, as she's standing next to him and, brushing his head or whatever she was doing, she turns to me and she says, I've got a diamond necklace for you. Oh. I said, oh. Okay, well, that's nice, I guess. She said, yeah.
To bring it?
No, she said, so, if you want it, come up and get it from me. You're going to have to come and get it from me. Actually, it's a diamond that your father gave to the first woman he was going to marry, but then left at the altar and married your mother instead. So I took that diamond and I kept it all these years, the one that he was going to use to marry a woman who's not your mother, who he was married to for 35 or so years.
What?
And if you'd like that, you have to come and see me.
Wow. I don't think we've got enough time in the world to unpack that. Wow.
Anyway, so it might give you a bit of an insight about generational trauma.
Yeah.
It's such a manipulative act on its own, let alone a vindictive act for literally taking a piece of jewelry and then for years going on about it when it's not even who he married.
How did she end up with the diamond after he left the other woman at the altar? But wow.
Who fucking knows? I don't know. I don't want to go and find out. I mean,
you could get the story.
I've thought, you know what? I've said before to Mum, I've said, maybe I should go and get my diamond and then sell it. I don't care about the bloody diamond. I'm not going to be a part of that manipulation.
I think you should put on your little red hood and go visit Grandma.
No, it'll have a string attached to it. It'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to give you part of the diamond now. If you come back next week, I'll give you the next part. Oh.
Or it'll be like, you can have a look at it today. I'm going to go and get it cleaned for you. Come back next time and I'll give it to you.
Or how about, I don't know, just a thought, actually pursuing a relationship with people instead of trying to manipulate them.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. It's got kind of echoes of cutlery in the mail.
Yeah, but she'd be too cheap to post it, though, honestly.
Well, yeah.
I think she used to reuse sandwich bags for the last 20 years. I don't think she's spent a cent on anything.
Oh, well, yeah, it's good to recycle, though.
Good.
Why not? Really? I mean, we do have to think of the planet.
Yeah.
Think of the grandchildren that she never had.
Well, no, she did. She had two of us.
Did she?
Yeah. She did. Yeah. She had two of us. None of them are in her life.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Grandchildren. Anyway, we digress.
So I think I set the scene of tension, right? So grief and tension. That's what's going on in those last 3 days. Grief and tension and the diamond smuggler. At some point, what happened in there is that we're in the corridor outside having a conversation. He's slipped into the stage where he's not even pretending to play with tools anymore. And then I felt like almost out of nowhere, my mum starts yelling at me and she's screaming at me in the hospital corridor about how I used to have tantrums when I was a kid, about the things that I said to her when I was like 7 years old. I can't even, I can't remember the specifics of everything that she said, but I can just remember feeling so shit being screamed at in the corridor. I didn't it in that point. I did my dissociative thing and I slip into what I think is crisis control. It's the same Louise that's able to be completely calm in a cyclone and manage staff It's the same Louise that could be at the scene of an accident with a pregnant woman screaming because she's been in a head-on wreck and have the calm wash over and be the one that calls the ambulance and gets her out of the car. Like, it's that, for me, that's what happens in those kind of moments. And so when she started screaming at me, instead of retaliating, I slipped into calm, dissociated Louise and tried to calm her down and tried to reason with her in my actions. So I didn't escalate it, but fuck me, I wanted to escalate it. I wanted to yell back because it's not fair. Because it's literally not fair to yell at somebody for something they said to you when they were 10 years old.
With 33-year-old ammunition against a child, essentially.
Because, if I said something when I was a child, I was a child. And I was, I think, 37 or 36 when he died. It's a long time from 10.
Yeah, it is a bit of a walk. I think you've probably learned a few things emotionally since then.
Do you think? But to be fair, I did used to have tantrums as a child. I would feel so overwhelmed sometimes by emotion that I would just go into a room and scream and tear things up and throw things around. And what my childhood looked like at some of those times is when we lived with this other woman, and she had raised mum because she'd been in terrible situations as well through, generational trauma. And this woman that had looked after her ended up living with us, and she was abusive. She was abusive towards mum. She was abusive towards my father. She wasn't necessarily abusive towards me when I was a child, but there was so much of that manipulation, and I hated watching her abuse mum. Like, she was emotionally abusive, but she was also physically abusive. She used to grab a walking stick and beat her with it.
Wow.
And I remember feeling so overwhelmed at all those things and just go, why don't you kick her out? Why don't you leave this? And those things used to overwhelm me. And of course I would have a tantrum, would hide under my bed. I would get so angry I'd slam doors, or I think one time I kicked my foot through one of them, So these things are kind of being brought back up at me.
And I think tantrums, to be fair, are actually pretty common with young kids.
Yeah.
And parents don't generally come back 30 years later and tell them all of their shortcomings as a 7-year-old.
And I know she's not listening to the podcast, at least I don't think she is. But this is not it's not an indictment on her. I'm trying to get to that point that it was a really high tension place with that the grief that's going on in those moments. I can find forgiveness like that really hurt, and also really helped as well, because as I was able to reflect on that, because those are things that were coming up for her at that time. They're obviously things that still bothered her, because you wouldn't bring it up 33 years later if it didn't still bother you.
No, well, I think, what your mum displayed is similar to what I displayed to my brother, because the stuff that I exploded over was years and years and years prior, I suppose, feeling excluded by an action that they were trying to help me feel included by, which sounds paradoxical, but I never met my grandfather because he died a year before I was born. But there was always a lot of conversation about him, which, when I was younger, it felt comforting to think that maybe he was around and that maybe I got a chance to kind of know him through other people. But as I got older and people were reminiscing, it started to take on a little bit of a different feeling, because I didn't have those memories that I could actually access. And the stories that were being told weren't stories that I could actually relate to other than having heard them before. So that built up over many years. And when he started reminiscing about our grandfather, that triggered me in a way that I didn't actually even expect. And, that was very upsetting for him. And, I apologized, and I'm not, definitely not proud of that moment, and I'm not. It's not something that I actually feel is actually. I don't know. Like I think in those moments of extreme acute grief, we say the things that we've been bottling up for so long.
Yeah, we do.
And clearly, there's a need to get those things out. But under different circumstances, we'd probably be able to say it in a much better way.
Yeah. Look, I did my dissociation at that time and slipped into that calm then, because that's my coping mechanism. That's how I deal with it. That's how I always learn to deal with it. Because, look, I had those tantrums when I was a kid because I was overwhelmed and frustrated, and I can actually now even apply from the last 6 or 8 months of my life a learning that actually maybe it was because of neurodivergence and it was actually a burnout and a meltdown and not a tantrum at all. But even without that as a lens, those are the kind of moments that I now see in hindsight led to me bottling up my emotions, led to that calm, the dissociating me that I developed, because in those moments where the anger was and the frustration was so overwhelming that I might act out, I was condemned for that. It wasn't okay. I was in trouble for that. So I learned to shut it off. Like, I think about when I was at school, when I was at primary school, and even a little bit when I was at high school, like I was bullied horribly. I was fat girl trauma, remember? The kids at school would bully me for things, and I felt like I couldn't actually go home and tell anybody about it, because then I felt like my father would bully me as well, because he used to say horrible things about my weight and my body, you know. So I remember one day getting bullied really badly at school. I don't know if I ever told you not the dinosaur story.
Yeah, you did.
Where it was like a school carnival and I had to run or something, and then they were screaming out like, not the dinosaur, because it was from that show Dinosaurs at the time.
Dinosaurs, not the mama.
Yeah, not the mama. That's it, not the mama. There goes not the mama. Anyway,
Cool.
I remember that day being so upset about that. I came home and I think Mum might have said, oh, something wrong. And I didn't say anything because I can't say anything because I felt like I would be bullied. And instead she'd bought some cream buns, I think, that day. And I'm like, do you know what? That's what I need right now. I think I just need a nice sugary cream bun. And I had like 2 cream buns. And then I think he came in and called me a pig. So...
All better. All better.
You see my point. Anyway, learning to hold in those emotions, the bad ones, the ones that eventually cause the damn wall to burst. The damn wall didn't burst for me that day in the hospital when she yelled at me. The damn wall burst for me 2 Christmases later when I went up to visit her with my partner at the time, and it devolved into a "you exclude me" conversation. And that's when I exploded back, honestly. That's when it happened. And to be fair to, my partner at the time, as shit as he was at many things, if he wasn't there, I might never have spoke to her again. If he wasn't there to mediate some kind of peace, I might never have spoke to her again.
Yeah.
Because for 2 years I carried around.
That's the thing.
I put on the calm facade for as much as I could, but in 2 years, she didn't once acknowledge that I lost a father. It was all about how it had affected her.
Yeah. And, when we don't actually address these things at the time, and it's not just grief, it can be anything. It can be any disagreement we have with people over the years. The longer we hold on to it and don't deal with it, then the bigger it gets. Boom.
Fucking boom. So, I think, him dying, that grief, that yelling, the tantrum I had, the tantrum she had, it'd start the chain reaction that led to the damn wall bursting. But do you know what happened when the damn wall burst? When I finally actually let rip all those things that I was feeling that day before Christmas, the 2 years after the fact, it's been better since. And as I've worked towards being able to actually express how I feel, it's gotten better. The relationship has gotten better. I don't feel like I have to hide as much anymore. And I'm sure part of that has to do with the fact that my father's dead, and so he hasn't got any words to hurt me with. And part of it has come from actually looking at it and going, well, he had a pretty shitty model to work with.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, like, even though she doesn't listen, I don't want anyone to walk away from this feeling like she's to blame. She did the best that she could do given what she had to work with, given her history of trauma and abuse going back, again, generations. It's getting better.
Any story we tell in this series, we're not setting out to blame anybody.
No.
Where it's really about getting that self-awareness and trying to move ourselves on from situations that we don't like.
Oh, yeah. I'm just as much to blame for any of that. I'm the one that, I wouldn't blame what I did when I was 10 years old, but I did have 33 years in between to start working on self-reflecting and work on my own feelings and maybe find a way to bring it up and didn't. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in the hospital, your mum calling you out on your tantrums was kind of like she was having a tantrum in that moment.
Was
caused
it?
by acute grief.
Yes.
Kind of highlights the fact that we all kind of can have tantrums.
We all need a good tantrum occasionally.
Yeah, we do. And our new best friend, Madhavi, comes to our emotional rescue again because she tells us what we've probably never heard after having a tantrum.
I was never listened to. I was never allowed to be sad. I mean, when you had a tantrum as a 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old, whenever it was, Louise, you were meant to. I mean, that's a normal, we're meant to have emotional reactions. And as a species, we kind of suck at, listening to our gut. By the time we reach a certain age, we've been so controlled and so manicured around our feelings and just, be a good girl, be a good boy. We're around people now. Put on a brave face, be friendly. Remember to say please and thank you, smile, and everything is designed. This comes from the parent ego. We associate our children's behavior, how well they regulate their emotions, how successful they are at school and beyond, as a reflection of ourselves, right? Until we learn to do better, until we learn to go, you know what, this actually isn't about me. I've got these little people that have come across and come out into this world, and it's now for us to allow them to be who they are. And so you were meant to get upset. You were meant to have that. In an ideal world, someone would have said, Louise, I can see this is really, really hard for you. Let's just take a moment. Would a hug help? Or I understand. Or thank you for coming and telling me you felt that way. But the reality is most people didn't hear that in our generation, Louise, because that was not what happened then. And even now, it's an extraordinarily difficult thing to do, right? Because it's so much easier to say that when our well-being's good, when our resilience is good, when our children are behaving well, then it's really easy. But in that moment, like I said earlier, if you've got an emotionally dysregulated kid having a tantrum in front of you, well, the mirror neurons in your brain fire away and they feel what you're saying. It's why Australians' funniest home video is so funny. I mean, you're watching funny stuff through the television and it feels like it's happening to you, right? Like you'd see something go, when you see it, you're not there, you're looking at it, but it's funny and you felt it because we feel what's happening in front of us. And so for parents today, we have to first forgive. If we went through that, go, well, everyone is doing the best with the skills and knowledge they have at the time. At the end of the day, we can only do what we can do. So that's the first step. And then the next step is to really start practicing well-being. I mean, well-being is our state, how our state of mind gets better. It's by doing something, many things every day that put us into a positive emotional state and feel good and joyful, and to rebuild our brains so that our emotions are much better tamed. And then when we are meeting our children in those moments, we're going to be in the best state of mind we can be. And every family has conflict, Louise. I always say to parents, there is no point going, I feel so guilty, I raise my voice. Everybody does. And you go back to your kid, and kids love us so much. They're so much more forgiving than we are. And we go up to them and we say, I really lost my cool. I hope you can forgive me. It really wasn't my intention to upset you. And then we bite our tongue and don't say, and it's because I asked you 15,000 times what I asked you to do. And we just keep it quiet because they know why we're frustrated. They know the rules. They know they're meant to put their stuff away. They know they're meant to do their homework. They know they're meant to turn off the IT when you ask them to. But in that moment, because they're children and they have very underdeveloped brains, they have momentary lapses in their self-control, in their impulse control, in their regulation. And we just keep repairing, it's rupture and repair in all relationships, right? Until we all get calmer, and then there's less rupture and a lot more connection. That's a very long answer to your question, but do I need to say any more about that? Have I just gone off on a complete tangent?
No, you're good. I mean, it makes me want to go off on tangents, but then we'll be sitting here for an hour debating the patriarchy and all of those learned behaviours of being a good girl that we're still trying to undo.
Yeah, and we have to undo them. We have to focus back on our own strengths and look back at everything. You know, this is the challenge I see in all of us is we're so good at seeing what's wrong with us and what we need to fix and what we need to change and what we still need to accomplish. And we forget to look back and celebrate on all the things that are working. And I think, you know, that's all part of this puzzle of healing all of those challenges, all of those unmet needs is, well, we can do something now. We're fully grown humans with developed brains and developing brains. You know, we wire what we fire, as everybody says, and it's true. So let's start firing thoughts in our heads around what is going well and what we can do. And, you know, we'll all get there. And then I'll be out of a job, but I'll find another one. Okay.
Awesome. One of the things that struck me as you were researching your work and the work you're doing with children and adults is the concept of reframing some of these highly emotionally charged incidents and taking them into learning opportunities, but being able to revisit them in a non-triggering way after they've happened so they can be a tool for growth. Can you walk us through that?
And again, you know, back to that first question, is this hard to teach? That's a hard thing to do, isn't it? Because our thoughts come with such automaticity that when we go back to anything, before we know, when we go back to any memory, before we know it, we've already had 50 thoughts about it, haven't we? You know, the mind is funny like that. So that takes a lot of work, and it is different for every single person because the way we help anybody has to be personalised. I mean, I've seen 2 similar situations, 50 similar situations, but I've had to deal with them all very differently because everyone's receptive to learning it at a different pace and in a different way. And so it is really through the engagement of daily practices that put us into a state of calm. So that improves our ability to regulate our feelings because, of course, you go back to a memory. If you're not good at coping with emotion yet, if you're not calm enough yet, well, the quality of those thoughts are going to be pretty bad. So you're going to be thinking based on emotion. So to get to that point, Andy, it's about daily micro steps of being calm, thinking hopeful, constructive thoughts, optimistic thoughts, so that our brain starts getting really, really good at then looking back and naturally going, well, they did the best they could with what they knew at the time. Or, you know, I coped with that, and looking at the fact that we are all still here, which means to a degree at least we coped with everything we've been through, and we can keep learning to cope better. And so by daily practices of optimism, of looking for the best in every person, focusing on this all links up, right? So if we look at people that we struggle with, but then look for something that's likable in them, right? And just keep, you know, getting into the habit of doing that. What we're doing is next time we look back on a difficult situation, we've wired a part of our brain that's used to looking for the good, looking for what good came out of that. What did I learn from that? Daily gratitude practice is very well researched to focus our attention on what we do have in our life rather than what we don't have, what is going well rather than what isn't. So if we do this every day, and we have to write a note to remind ourselves a lot of the time to do it, we start to strengthen optimism, constructive thinking, healthy mindset, so that when we do look back on all the difficulty, and we've all had it, right, at various degrees, we're more likely for those automatic thoughts to maybe not go into 50 automatic negative thoughts, maybe go into 10 before we go, oh, hang on a sec, this feels yucky. I don't like thinking this way anymore. I'm done with the old way. I'm just moving on. Does that make sense? So it's like a daily training.
So it's strengthening a muscle.
It is. Yes, like when I was at the gym this morning, Andy, there was not a lot of fun going on, let me tell you.
That's why I haven't been for 10 years.
Yeah, but I come out stronger, right? So when I leave, it is through the discomfort of pushing that muscle. If it felt easy, it'd still be good because I'm still doing something, that works for me personally, fine. But it was through pushing myself to that next point where I just wanted to just walk out, But that's it. That's how, there's a truth in this adversity, and it is like a muscle. We grow. If everything was easy, there'd be very little to learn. And every horrible thing we've gone through, if we look at it through that state, that frame of mind of, well, what did I learn from that? What was the benefit? And that's the last thing you want to do in the middle of it. In the middle of it, you're just like, I cannot believe this is happening. I am really annoyed. And that's normal. It'd be weird if you weren't thinking like that, right? But when you look back and you go, well, what did I learn? And we must do this. We must do this for our challenges. And some of us can do it on our own, and some of us need to do it with a counsellor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist or a friend or whatever it is. But we've got to go back over adversity and find something in it. Where's the gold nugget? Where's the thing that has made me stronger, better, smarter, more capable, more skilled? How did it put me on a course that maybe I wasn't anticipating, but here I am, and thank goodness I'm here. So that really sucked, but now that 10 years has passed, I can see its benefit. It doesn't matter when you figure it out, as long as we make meaning somewhere, right? And some things are much harder to get there. Some things are easier, but that's how we do it every single day. Just keep flexing the muscles, the resilience muscles, the well-being muscles, and it just makes the past so much easier to face and just to enjoy this precious present and really look ahead at our future with optimism. And that's so crucial for our well-being and our emotional well-being and our good state of mind, our healthy state of mind.
It's really clear that we can't actually help anybody else until we help ourselves first. Is there anything in that moment when things seem to be going off the rails that you can do to break that circuit, when you realize that that's not the time to try and educate your kids or yourself or anything like that? The momentum's too great. Do you have any suggestions then of what you could do to kind of stop the train before it heads into the station?
Yeah, such a great question, Louise. The most important thing is that we first and foremost spend a lot of time every single day deliberately doing calm things, right? So that is, and I know I've mentioned it already, but I'm bringing it up again because nothing will work when the train has left the station.
Yes.
If that part of the brain isn't strong yet, right? So we have to strengthen the calm in our brain. We have to strengthen well-being. We have to commit every single day. This is how it truly works, right? People don't talk about this often enough, that until we're doing this stuff, choosing, no one is going to do well-being for us. No one is going to do healthy thinking for us. No one is going to do optimism and gratitude for us. We have to say, you know what, I'm doing this for myself. I love myself enough and the people in my life enough to spend time every day to just be in a state of calm so that part of the brain actually works. Because once you're with your child or a colleague or a friend or a moment or a supermarket queue or whatever it is, or a tech glitch, whatever it is. Once you're in that moment, right, you've got to have a strong part of the brain to cope. But once you're there, Louise, what I always suggest to parents is to picture. I've got a slide on my PowerPoint presentations of a little baby with I can't even describe it without it sounding strange. So I'm not even going there. But I'm not going there. But what I remind parents is just to imagine that they can't speak, and that, I think what was that famous saying of Gandhi's? Only speak if it improves the silence, right? Mm. And so I try and do that. I really do. I think to myself, all right, I start with that intention is I will hear things today. It's at work or at home. I'll hear things and they're going to trigger me and frustrate me. And I will be an adult and I will be responsible for my emotions. And I will pause until I know I'm calm. And that starts with self-awareness. That starts with going, there's so much, isn't there, work we need to do, Louise, to get to this point. But you go, you know what, I'm going to actually, from now on, every time I'm annoyed, I'm going to tune back into my head and go, name the emotion. Right, I'm feeling annoyed. I'm feeling annoyed because XYZ just happened. And so when we start talking to ourselves that way, when we start talking to ourselves through our emotions, what happens is we start getting to know them rather than trying to move them through. And humans are very good at dumping our emotions on other people, right? Instead of dealing with them ourselves. And so if you grew up with that happening to you, where every time you lost it, someone else lost it, and then you lost it some more, and then they lost it some more, that has to be undone. And it's undone by becoming self-aware and going, oh, I'm feeling really angry. And so I'm angry right now, so I'm going to take deep, slow breaths until my brain switches back on. Because as long as you're feeling, you're not thinking, right? Big feelings, small thoughts. So it's so crucial in that moment that we have a plan ahead of time, Louise, where we sit down and be big people and we go, I'm a grown-up, so I'm going to get triggered by kids. And because they're 20, 30 years younger than me, and my brain at 47 is going to see things differently, right? To my 7-year-old, to my 15-year-old, it's just going to. That's how it is. So I'm going to be the grown-up because that's my responsibility. I chose to be a parent. I chose to work with children, and it's my responsibility to handle this well. So I have a plan now. Next time a child gets upset in front of me, I'm going to say nothing until I am calm. And I'm going to explain it kindly. I'm going to say, if you see me walking away or moving away, it's nothing personal. I'm learning to calm myself down so that I can speak to you in a way that I feel really great about afterwards. And when we have that authenticity with our families, with our partners, with our friends, where we show, I'm so not perfect. I'm so trying to figure all of this out. Gosh, how good is that for a relationship with your kid or your partner or your friends? When you're able to say, I'm learning to be calm when I'm not calm. So that's how we do it. We do it and then we stuff it up and we go, well, my calm plan didn't work that time and I'm really sorry. I hope you can forgive me. But then we're facing it, aren't we? That's how we grow. We're not then dumping more anger. Well, you just picked up your socks. I mean, which just keeps us stuck. It keeps us stuck. So let's unstick. And let's just keep trying. And I think in that moment, silence is golden. Breathing slowly and deeply balances the carbon dioxide and oxygen in our brain so we can get out of fight, flight, freeze, enter the prefrontal cortex state. So that part of our brain is thinking clearly. And we just do so much better when we're using our brains rather than our reactivity and our emotions.
The thing about grief, it does help you gain that new perspective on how things have been with family patterns and relationships. I mean, what are you doing for Christmas? Apparently causes a rift for me and for you.
Well, For quite a long time, it was quite triggering for me, even from the perspective where the people that would ask that knew that it would get a rise out of me and the reasons why it would get a rise out of me. And it doesn't have to be like that anymore, and it's not, which is great.
So why did What Are You Doing for Christmas get a rise out of you? What was in the hindsight, what did that trigger?
This is about family dynamics and competition and me not actually being allowed to host Christmas. Which sounds kind of weird, I suppose, but there's no normal when it comes to anything, particularly Christmas and the way families act around Christmas. But in my family, we would all congregate around mum and dad's place when I was younger, and my grandmother would come up. And apparently before I was born, when my grandfather was still alive, the tradition was to go down to their place because he had said, whenever I'm alive, Christmas is here. So put a bookmark in that. And come forward a good 30 years or so, and my brothers are starting to have their own families. And so the concept of Christmas at my mum and dad's place is starting to get a little bit more flexible, and we're going to one brother's place one Christmas and coming back to mum and dad's the next Christmas. And another brother says, look, you always go to his place and not mine. Come to mine for Christmas. So we go to their place for Christmas. And it wasn't a regular thing really in the beginning, because it was like, oh, you've got a new house. Let's have your first Christmas in the house, which was lovely. Then I moved out of home, and my first Christmas in my house came up, and I got, well, no, you're only renting. So we'll have it here.
Yeah.
Okay. Point taken.
And then how many years?
This isn't my permanent home. So when I buy a house, I can expect Christmas at my place. Bought a house, first Christmas, everyone can come to my place this Christmas. No, look, your place isn't really big enough for everybody and it's a bit too far. I had driven my parents from Sydney to Canberra for Christmases. I had driven with them all over Sydney for Christmases, and not once did my family ever come to my place for Christmas. The first time I ever hosted Christmas was after moving here to Adelaide, and my partner and I hosted Christmas here, and his family came. My family still have not ever deemed it satisfactory to come to my place for Christmas. I've always had to go to their places. And in fact, when mum and dad were still alive, it was starting to get shared around. Like one year we'd go to this brother, this year we'd go to that brother, and then it would alternate. Never came to my place. I'd always take mum and dad to wherever Christmas was being hosted. I kind of built up a little bit of a fuck you attitude towards the Christmas lunch, to the point where, when mum went and dad was still in Sydney, for the first couple of years, I kept that pattern going where we'd go to one brother's place, then go to the other brother's place the next year. And then one year, one of my brothers said that they want to come down to Adelaide. I went, great. But I knew the patterns, and I knew how it was going to transpire, and long and the short of it is they didn't come. And so at that point, I broke my first family pattern. And I said from that year on, look, okay, it's too late for me to organise to come up there for Christmas. I'm going to stay in Adelaide. And so from that year onwards, I stayed in Adelaide one year, and then I went to Sydney the next year. But on top of that, I didn't actually go to either of their places for Christmas anymore. Every year they'd say, what are you doing for Christmas? Come to our place for Christmas. Why don't you come to our place for Christmas? And I'd say, no, I'm in Sydney to see Dad for Christmas, and we're going here for Christmas. You're welcome to come. Come and join us. We'd love to have you.
Yeah.
They never did. Until the very last Christmas, one of them did. But other than that, not.
I understand how What Are You Doing for Christmas was triggering before your dad died then. How did it become triggering after?
Yeah, I guess, I came to the realization that I really needed to start supporting my own happiness. The old patterns that I'd been kind of just in autopilot with over so long, they had to stop because they weren't serving me. It is
autopilot, isn't it?
It is.
It really is.
And, as we fall into those patterns as well, we really start to devalue ourselves. We start to kind of just do things out of habit. And the only way to really kind of get what you want or get what you need is to interrupt those patterns. And when you throw a spanner in those works, springs fly, like the cogs fly out.
The cogs fly out. The spanner in the spokey dokes. Yeah.
That's right. But you've got to make something new for yourself. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going.
You do.
I've seen people go to their deathbeds, never having kind of feeling confident enough to do what they need to do to get what they need or what they value or to value themselves. And I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't be that person.
Yeah.
because I think if I got to the end of my life and looked backwards over all of those years and saw that I had only ever lived my life according to other people's expectations, then I don't feel like that would be a very satisfactory life for me.
Yeah.
I've got my own dreams and my own visions, like anybody has, and I don't think anybody should give up themselves for another person's traditions or another person's directions or expectations. I would love to have my family around for Christmas, but they don't want to, and so I need to make peace with that and not pretend that they want to share Christmas with me because of anything more than they just don't want to do it anywhere other than their home. You know, there's no give and take in that scenario to me, and it doesn't feel respectful. Amongst all of that kind of round robin stuff of one of their places one year, then the other place the other year, they never went to each other's place either. So that's where I say it was all about competition as well, because it was kind of falling into this pattern of, well, who do you love more? You know, they get more time with these people, or, you know, you go and see them more, and it becomes like a fucking accounting process, and I was fucking over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to be a fucking accountant when it comes to being with my family. I want to be with my family and to feel loved and to love them in return. I don't want to feel like it's a competition.
Love shouldn't be a formula on a spreadsheet.
Correct.
Get it on a T-shirt.
And you know that I love a spreadsheet.
I know, that's why I mentioned it. If we tally up column A with column B and we get the whole sum, it equals love.
Look, you know, everyone's going to have their own formula to apply, and it's always going to look like they've been shortchanged. So just do your own thing, I say. You've got to be happy. And so that question doesn't trigger me now.
Not now, no.
Sometimes I still see it coming my way, and I know what it is, or know what I perceive it is, because it might not even be that. That might have just been me in my state at the time thinking that that's how it was being used. But by the same token, it doesn't affect me anymore.
The thing you said there about a few minutes ago about if you got to the end of your life and you realised that you'd lived your whole life for someone else's expectations, or, you know, to make somebody else happy and never were true to yourself or valued yourself, that is... I think that's why we work so well together. I think that's why our projects like this work well together. You've been on that journey of understanding that, and your path has come through a family story. And my path to that understanding probably comes from suppressing everything and then having it all explode in my face. I suppose I'm just really proud of us now that we're at a space where we can recognize that truth, and we can work towards and be ourselves, our true selves now. We're not going to get to 70, 80, 90 and have that regret. We might not have done so well before, but we can change now, and we are changing.
We are. And I think for me, it was actually severing some of those relationships, to be honest.
Yeah.
Or severely changing them in a lot of ways so that I could figure out exactly what I wanted, because while I was in that pattern of just doing it out of rote, out of habit, I'd kind of lost sense of what I actually wanted and how I wanted things to be. And some of those relationships are still severed, you know, and that used to hurt me as well. But I don't know, it's kind of turned around now. It's become more a source of personal power for me, because I don't know if I've said this in a previous episode, but I'll say it again now if I haven't. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean lashing back and taking blows. It's sort of physical act. It's actually giving yourself voice. And I think, you know, when people have kind of said to me, you know, as one relative said to me in this whole interaction around Dad's death, stand up for your bloody self. You know, you never stand up for yourself. To me, that sounds like fighting words. Like, you know, I'm having a go at you, now you have a go back at me. And that to me is, it's not what standing up for yourself is. For me, standing up for myself is drawing a line and saying, look, I'm not going to take this anymore. And whether I say it in those words and then walk away, or whether I just walk away and disengage, it has the same impact in that I'm no longer exposing myself to that.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's as simple as knowing that you've had enough, walking away from a bad situation, knowing that we deserve better.
Yeah. Sometimes, as our friend Madhavi says, Sometimes we just need some space and time to sort this stuff out.
If we've got stuff, we've got to sort it out. We've got to sort it out because it will pass on. And I think that's the best thing we can all do is go, you know what, I've got some stuff to work out and I'm going to get some help for that. And it's totally okay to ask for help. In fact, it's crucial and important and normal to ask for help. And I'm going to be brave and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to stop it here. This is where it ends.
We've gained so much from Madhavi in this episode, I think.
Our conversation with Madhavi has been life-altering. Some of those realizations, those confronting of those big emotions, amazing.
Yeah, look, I spoke a little while back when we were talking to Lucy Bloom about fantasizing about what could go right, and I was saying at the time, commenting from a series perspective or, a season perspective for Reframe of Mind, that was a bit of a turning point.
Yeah.
In the direction of how we were exploring things. And I think, this conversation with Madhavi was definitely a turning point for me in my personal story. I'm really kind of starting to feel confident sitting with those big emotions.
Yeah.
Not actually lashing out and serving those big emotions to people, but understanding that, I'm feeling something big here. And you know what? I can sit with it and I can do something productive with it.
And it's okay to feel something big. There's nothing going wrong by feeling something big. Big emotions are normal and we all experience them and they don't need to be judged and they don't need to be condemned. They're perfectly okay.
Yeah. So Madhavi has really helped us to kind of understand all of this. And I mean, she's got so much experience. She runs workshops with schools and community organisations. She's got an amazing range of resources. We're going to put some links up in the show notes around all of that because she really has got some amazing stuff for you to access around all of this.
Oh, yeah. I was looking at her website yesterday to see what was up there. She's written so many kids' books. She's written courses for adults on how to parent and actually talk to kids. And she's got heaps of free resources online as well too. So positivemindsaustralia.com.au is her website. She's based in South Australia too. She's a Adelaidean, like you, Andy.
She is. She's an Adelaide like me.
Adelaide. Definitely someone to support, especially if you need help with dealing with big emotions.
Definitely. I think I'm going to have to buy Madhavi a big coffee for all of this.
So now we're in touch with our big emotions and we're ready to deal with them. Do you know what helps with that?
I think you're going to tell me.
Having people around to help you, to support you. People who align with you, who get you and can walk the journey with you.
Yeah, it's that strong support network that we can put around ourselves to actually bring us through the tough times, but also lend support to each other because we have shared values and we actually support each other. So next time on Reframe of Mind, who better to talk to about this than former Diamonds coach Lisa Alexander? And we're going to explore teamwork, community and building that healthy support network.
Netball's been such an important part of all of our country towns and all of our local communities, and the things that we've been taught looking after the bigger picture. We before me, the teamwork aspect of netball has got so many great lessons for people. That's what I've got faith in.
You've been hearing our story and now we really want to hear yours.
Connect with @Reframe of Mind on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and Twitter.
Or connect with @Welcome Change Media on LinkedIn.
You can also contact us via reframeofmind.com.au with your stories or suggestions for future topics.
We'd like to thank today's guests for sharing their personal stories and insights. For more information on any of the subjects, guests or references used in this episode, please see our show notes or reframeofmind.com.au.
Reframe of Mind is a Welcome Change Media production.
Maladies or maladies?
Maladies.
Maladies?
Where's that?
I'm going to say problems if that's all right.
If you like.
Thank you. You would say maladies.
I'd say maladies. Yeah.